Hi. This time it is about yet another big issue, an issue which plagues many of us who have a character called a boss, a manager. A lot of people are plagued with this issue of how do I actually get the best out of my boss? Of course, the boss has to get the best out of you, but how do you get the best out of your boss? It becomes more difficult if you don't have a boss who necessarily is someone that you enjoy being with. Let's remember a couple of things. Your boss or your manager, your supervisor is one of the biggest stakeholders in your success and possibly your happiness. It is a fact. If you do not have a boss who is going to be backing you up, I think you have greater odds stacked up against you for your own effectiveness and your success. So the fact is, he is an unavoidable bother for you. But how can such a character be actually your best friend? Be a person who can be your force multiplier, who can help you actually get your own sense of success and therefore happiness. A couple of suggestions that I made. One is you will definitely be unfortunate if you get to be working with someone you just don't get on with. And sometimes it happens. Two personalities just do not relate with each other. It is actually a pure chemistry mismatch. Now these things happen. Now one option is that if you can't change your boss, leave your boss. The other is if you can't change your boss, change yourself. And if you want to do something of a hybrid, can you get a relationship to work which actually works for both of you? So what could you be doing? I think many a time we do not wear the boss's hat as much as we should be wearing. We work very hard. We spend long hours. We really slave our weekends. But are we working on the priorities that were dear to the boss? Or were we working on priorities which were not important? Misalignment on priorities, because possibly it's not clearly spelled, because we never clarified, maybe we never checked back with the boss, maybe the boss never reconfirmed to you. Whatever the reason, many a time problems with bosses and therefore expectation mismatch happens when we are not aligned on our priorities. And it is very important to remember that many bosses also have their share of bosses, and these bosses have their bosses. And they all work in a context of a real world where priorities change, where business contexts change. And therefore it is very important to be aligned, and it makes sense for us to double check on our priorities once in a while. That's the first thing that we should do. Second is we should also try to understand the persona of the boss as much as he or she should understand your persona. Now, no two bosses are identical. And if you worked with multiple bosses, you will know what I'm talking. Some people are more expressive, others are taciturn. Some are more forceful, others are softer. Some typically are aggressive, some are apparently passive. Some are more appreciative, others may be as appreciating but don't express it. And all of these personality quirks and characteristics impact your perception. I think it is very important, therefore, to spend time, to connect, to chat, to speak, to do your own homework about the boss. Many a time, we also judge our bosses wrong, as they also judge us wrong. But if you were to be able to work on your boss, it is important to understand what makes the boss tick. What does he or she like? So for example, some people like a lot of detail, a lot of attention. And maybe that's not your strength. Can you therefore start building on this capacity and capability? Some other bosses would delegate more. They don't want to be bored with the detail. They want you to actually work through the detail and come with a clearer choice. And imagine you're a person who loves dumping the boss with detail. Now, both these situations, there's nothing right or wrong, but it's an issue of alignment, it's an issue of pairing. And I think it's important for us to understand what is it that your boss wants? How does your boss want? And to what extent are you in a position to flex that? That's the second part. third part of actually managing a boss-subordinate relationship, and I learned it the hard way in my early years, is what is the best time for you to talk to your boss? Some people prefer to talk first thing in the morning as soon as they are in the office. Some people like to do right at the end of the day when they are done with their day responsibilities. Imagine you bring a conversation at the wrong time. It could be fireworks. So it is very important to know when is it that your boss has the space in his or her mind for you and your agenda. And it is important to time that right. Because remember, every time you have your emotions and pressures, so does your boss. And the wise you will time the conversation well. So this is the third thing that you should be remembering when you are handling a relationship. The fourth, how do you influence a boss? Every boss finally needs to be influenced. It is not because he or she loves you or does not love you. Every boss wants to be influenced. Some like to be influenced in a certain way. Example, some bosses will need a lot of detail, a lot of logic, a lot of homework before concurring to your proposal and therefore liking what you do. Some others possibly prefer relationships, prefer conversations. The details may be left with you. Some people prefer to be talking big, broad issues, and as long as there is alignment, you have your space. But please understand, what is the way you can influence your boss best? And sometimes bosses are best influenced not directly, but almost using a carom board approach. You work through someone who is able to help explain your point of view better, or at least soften the ground for you. Now, this is not politics. This is just being practical. And even if it were politics, I always joke, like cholesterol, there is good politics and there is bad politics. As long as you're not doing bad politics, you're being sensible and wise. Because it is all about wearing the boss's hat, understanding the persona of the boss, preparing your own brief depending on what your boss needs in terms of detail or the breadth, and finally, making sure that you influence the boss in a certain way. And finally, one of the very practical tips of a good boss-subordinate relationship is feedback. It is always good to ask for feedback. Some bosses naturally give feedback, good and not so good. But I would very strongly encourage, it is good for you to ask for feedback on what you're doing and how you're doing. Some bosses will give you feedback, some will not give feedback. But at least no one will hold it against you that you never asked for feedback. And when you have that opportunity, it's an opportunity you'll discover that some bosses use to thank you, compliment you, appreciate you. They always meant that, but they never had that moment. And some bosses will also use the opportunity to give you real-time feedback so you can course correct. You can flex your style. You can refocus on some of your behavioral dimensions. But most of all, it's an opportunity of building trust. I have found from my own experiences that when I have asked feedback from my bosses in my career, bosses have also asked me likewise. And they've said, Prabir, what would you think I could be doing different? What more should I be doing? What less should I be doing? And the more you're able to engage in a conversation and a dialogue like this, you start building a trusting relationship. And at the end of the day, if we recognize that it is actually a dyad of a relationship where both sides work equally hard, relate equally sensibly, that true magic happens, then you will take the lead as much as your boss. So don't hold yourself back. Don't expect the boss to be a superhuman. Don't expect the person to have all the initiative or all the time. Because if you have your little tensions, the boss has still bigger worries on his or her head. Go ahead and chat up with your boss. Go ahead, engage with your boss. Go ahead and relate with your boss. And you will see the magic unfold.